Information presented on Sky News Real Estate is general in nature. Viewers should seek their own professional advice before purchasing products or services. Sky News Real Estate may receive a fee for commercial arrangements with companies featured in this programming. This is Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing.
Hello and welcome to Smart Investing. I'm James Treble, filling in for Chris Gray on tonight's show. Now, how do the seasons affect real estate now that we're in chilly winter? Is the Royal Commission into banking really impacting on the housing and finance markets? And which markets are holding up to the current downturn and downward price movement around the country? Well, joining us tonight is Steve Venn from Century 21 Lifestyle Caloundra, and of course favourite of the show, Charles Tarby, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. Now, Steve, I'm wondering, the big question, I know you moved from Melbourne up to the Sunshine Coast. Was that because of the chilly weather?
Oh, a big part of it. I don't miss those cold winter mornings in Melbourne that consistently got dished out to me. And yes, there's nothing wrong with having the sun on the back up in the Sunshine Coast.
He was talking about how lovely it is here. He thought that he was back in the Sunshine Coast when he landed. Yeah.
Don't worry, mate. It's been pretty chilly here as well.
Yeah.
Now, the three of us have enjoyed many winters, haven't we?
Yes.
Now, I'm wondering, you know, we're seeing a downturn around the country, Charles, and obviously the chillier weather, the winter is notoriously a quieter time for real estate. How do you think this is panning out?
It certainly is. We've had no real estate seasons for years. It's just been start to go.
Full on.
Yeah, normally, as you would know, we'd have the summer, the winter, spring, etc., autumn. But we haven't had one of those. We only just started to creep into a winter real estate season last year. Just started to creep into it. This year, I think we're in full swing. Okay. And so we're noticing a big change. But the market, as you know, is very different, no matter where you are around Australia. Yeah. So here it could be tough, and where Steve is, it could be really dynamic. And it was great for us to get a chance to look at, specifically at the Sunshine Coast, Steve, because I've always talked that area up for a long time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Charles. And yeah, we're probably seeing the start of a winter market, although we're nearly at the end.
Well, you
of
better
it.
hurry.
Yeah, you know, when people say, "Oh, get ready for spring," but I don't think in the Sunshine Coast we really have a winter. It's spring and summer, and it just flows on.
Yeah.
You know,
do you think that you're feeling the impact up there? I mean, it's been a pretty strong market up there for you.
Yeah, look, and it's still consistent. There's no signs of any real significant slowing. You know, we had a bit of a quieter June, but that's normal to last year. Yeah, all those sort of things happening. And July's just taken off sort of gangbusters again. So, yeah, no, it's an exciting market.
Isn't that interesting? Because you've got that region that is really moving, and in Sydney, especially that marketplace, a lot of agents are going through a major adjustment period. So it's quite interesting.
It is quite intriguing. Now, look, I'm wondering, Charles, what you're thinking with the concern going on at the moment because of the Royal Commission. I mean, it's a lot going on. I was hearing the AMP being slammed on the radio in the car during today. How do you think that's affecting business as you know, and as well as the downturn?
Well, another one of Chris's guests, John Manciamelli. I mentioned John. He loves being mentioned.
Yeah,
by
good.
The way.
Hello, John.
John, he was livid when we started, because he's involved in the finance industry. And when we started talking about the Royal Commission just a couple of weeks ago, well, he nearly lost it. There is a significant change because of it. Steve will tell you a different story for himself in a moment, but because you've got a lot of people coming from the south prepared, but realistically it has definitely had an impact on the industry. Even for myself personally, with the same bank I've been banking with for years, asked me to fill out a form the other day, which I'd never seen before. And it was because they really are scrutinising everything they do right now.
It's not just the tighter banking procedures, though, isn't it? It's also about perception from the public who are watching things that are happening, and they're feeling a little bit more wary, which is adding on to this sort of cooling down around the country.
The banks have always been a great target, as you know, and luckily for us, we had 4 of the strongest banks in the world out of the top 10 when the GFC hit. So they must be doing something right, but what's going on for them is certainly impacting on most of the market, but yours is different.
Yeah, look, it is a little bit different. We're finding our buyers are coming to our open homes, Charles, and they're prepared, whereas previously they may not have gone and seen the banker or their broker, and a lot of them are finance approved.
Right.
And a lot of our buyers are also sort of financial sufficient to complete, you know, particularly our southern buyers that might have sold real estate in the southern states have come up to the Sunshine Coast.
I hate to interview the interviewer, but you'd be seeing it yourself with watching those auctions 6 hours every Saturday. You're on air. And what you're seeing that sort of change.
Well, it's interesting to watch because we're seeing a lot of floundering, a lot of people holding back, even to push to get the first bids over the line is quite interesting. But it's also now we've been discussing a lot on the show about the tactics of the agents and also the importance of good agents after the auction, because you know those three phases of the auction: pre-auction, the auction day itself.
You are good.
And then the lead up afterwards. You know, and I think that people forget that.
We'll get you back into the industry.
Yeah, do you think? No, I'm doing the interior side now. Stephen, I'm wondering, do you think that it is the Sydney and Melbourne buyers that are coming up, and you think that's why they're so prepared when they're coming up, or is it the prices there that we can, you know, they're considerably different to us?
Yeah.
What do you think's driving the market?
I think it's it's the old Aussie cliche. You get so much bang for your buck on the Sunshine Coast.
And sunshine.
Oh, yes, and that too. That's a given. And when you put all these sort of factors together, and we're seeing our southern friends come up and have change from, their real estate transactions that they may have had in their, whether it be Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane for that matter, and still come and get a lovely property and still have a great lifestyle with it.
You've got significant infrastructure upgrades, though. I mean, the airport's being upgraded. Is that becoming international?
Yeah, we were flying out there today. We noticed that there was international flights coming in and out.
And there's a hospital up there with major spend going. There's a lot of spend, and it's not like the Gold Coast where there's a lot of movement of population. The Sunshine Coast has got a very high owner-occupier base, and that's what really makes it a solid community as well.
There's many pockets within it. It's not just one market.
Oh yeah, that's
a vastly different base.
Yeah, totally
Charles, just going back to the Royal Commission a little bit, what steps do you think that people watching could be taking to sort of make themselves be a little bit more, prepared to be dealing with this changing condition?
Look, I've always mentioned to people that for me it's about the relationship they have with their banker or their broker or their real estate agent for that matter. A lot of people expect people to call them. A lot of buyers will say, oh, the agent didn't call me. And I say, you want an advantage, you should be calling the agent. Call them every week, take them a cup of coffee, find out what's going on. Build a relationship with a broker or an agent, because if a property comes on the market, they'll think of you first if it suits what you're after. And that goes with brokers. There are good brokers out there and there are better brokers. And I think that if you've got a good relationship with one of those, they know you're out there looking, you give them the information they need, they'll always be on the search for you for a better loan.
Do you deal with a lot of property buyers up your way? Is that a big chunk of your market up in the Sunshine Coast?
Oh yeah, a certain degree. We deal with a few buyers agents here and there too that come up, more from the southern states. Once again, it's not something that's quite common, but yeah, we do come across it from time to time.
And do you see a big difference between the market? I mean, it's like you've almost got your subclimates there. You've got Maroochydore, you've got Noosa, and then the hinterlands. It's are they vastly different?
They are. They are very, very different. We've got the Caloundra region where I'm from and based, which is obviously the southern end of the Sunshine Coast, and then we've got our little beachside pockets that that are off of them. The Noosas, the market up there. I've spoke to a few agents up there just of late. They're still ticking along quite strong, and there's a lot of top end up there that is moving quite consistently as well.
Steve can market property anywhere. He's in the top 2% in Century 21 in the world in sales. So even though he plays,
are you watching this, everyone?
He's on down the bottom. I'm down the bottom of the Sunshine Coast. Don't let him play. Don't let him play us.
And I think it's that time when the years of experience. It's the old. I walk slowly, but I've got the big stick, isn't it? As opposed to the running young bucks.
Yes, the old bull, young bull sort of scenario, I suppose.
Don't worry, I'm closer in age than you think. So, Charles, we're seeing the country changing. We're seeing a softening in the market. We see it predominantly in Sydney and Melbourne. They are the biggest machines of real estate, if you like, within Australia. You've got your finger on the pulse through the Century 21 brand around the country. Do you see that reflected? Do you see it sort of...
Yes, I see it in different pockets. My organisation is web-based, so when a property is listed for sale, we see it automatically, or when it's sold, we see it automatically. So we're able to chart suburb by suburb around the country, as well as region and medium price. All of those things, we can see it all in real time. It's almost as though I've got a dashboard up on the wall at the office. You can see the movement if you had nothing to do all day.
Yeah, of course. That's all we do.
So there are areas. We had one of our most exceptional real estate practitioners from South Australia here the other day, Greg Nybo, and he was saying, look, we've got all these suburbs. You can buy a three-bedroom brick, like a semi-detached now. They're doing semi-detached in suburbs of Adelaide now, in new areas, for 215,000 positive return. That's house and land. And you sort of wonder, and the jobs over there are starting to lift quite significantly. So it just depends where you go. I mean, Perth is still coming out of the doldrums, but really a great place to look at. And I think that the markets people are watching most is probably Sydney, because it went through the biggest change in terms of pricing.
Well, I bought my first house and it was 203,000, and that was 1994. It's a damn long time ago.
We should have bought
13%, which was scary at the time.
I was doing 18%, so yeah, it was a terrible time. I can't tell you some of the stories there. I'd get kicked off the chair.
I think we should just be talking about that one night. Now, it's time to check what is happening with the property markets around Australia with the Charles Tarby machine that he is, chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. If we can start, Charles, with the national auction clearest rates.
Yeah, it's great news. We had a massive spike. I think it was like about a 0.05% over last week. The clearance rate was 60.6%, which was pretty good. I mean, they've been in the 50s for a while from a national level. But this time last year, they were 69.9. So all of a sudden, that gap is closing, whereas it was certainly 15 to 20% wider a few weeks ago. Sydney came in at 61.3 with 400 auctions, and Melbourne came in at 62.3 with 612 auctions. So that's not too bad. If you're a real estate practitioner and people are talking about selling 6 out of 10 under the hammer, you're having a pretty good time.
Why do you think that was then? It's a big jump, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's starting to settle back down again. There's a little bit more stock coming on the market. People are starting to understand their relationships with their bankers or brokers and agents. And I think also the warmer weather started to keep people more...
As long as it's not people, putting a jacket on and accidentally putting their arm up.
For a bid.
The auctioneer jumping on.
We talked about Adelaide before. Adelaide was the best. Canberra's been the best for a long time. Adelaide had a 75% clearance rate last week. I know it was off the back of 60, I think it was 67 properties, but still gives you a good indication.
Yeah, it's good. If we jump onto the homes advertised for sale,
we've had a slight increase this week of 0.95%, which is pretty good. Winter is usually a decline in terms of stock, but 0.95. But we have 7.9% more stock on the market today than we had exactly this time last year. So there's still that high level of stock in comparison, and there's still that caution on buyers to make an offer. And there are still properties not going to auction because the agents will take a buyer beforehand. So there's still all the indications that we're in a slow market overall, but the stock levels themselves, along with the quietness of buyers from overseas, are giving people a reprieve to make an offer in general suburban areas of Sydney and Melbourne. They're getting a bit of a chance.
Now, you don't have to worry about all these winters affecting your brain. You're rattling off these percentages perfectly, and I've got paperwork to read off. The residential rent price movements, Charles.
Yeah, that's been a really interesting one across the country. Down again 1.15% from this time last week from an overall perspective. But the interesting part of that is that Sydney is the one that's probably suffered the most. You're getting a better opportunity in Sydney than you have had for a long time. Melbourne is still holding out. It's still hanging on to its prices and getting modest increases. And we watched Hobart hitting over 25.51% at one stage over the last 3 years since January 2015. It's down to 24-odd%. No real deal to worry about. But Perth and Darwin are still in the high 19s and 15s, but coming backwards. So there's a correction going on there. There's definitely in the positive.
Yes.
There's definitely a negative correction in Sydney, and Melbourne's still stable.
Wow, maybe people are feeling the cold. They're not all moving to Hobart after all. They're coming up to see you up in the Sunshine Coast. Finally, the residential vacancy rates.
Very quickly with those, they're pretty boring stats, Steve. 0.49% for Melbourne, great. Sydney 2.05, still low. Perth 8.89%, still up there, but still in a reasonably good area. So I think those three together, add them up, divided by 3.79% average over those three.
See that?
How's that sound?
Bam, I know. And we're wearing the glasses. We're supposed to be the intelligent ones.
I've probably got it wrong. Let's go with it.
Sounded good.
Look, it's very good. You're going to be sticking with us after the break, yeah?
Yeah, certainly am.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Charles.
Thank you.
As always, thank you very much. We are going to go to a very short break, but stay with us because we've got plenty more here on Smart Investing.
You're watching Sky News Real Estate. Smart Investing.